The Project for the New American Century was a Zionist-based think tank that was made up of both Republicans and Democrats alike. It was founded in 1997 and lasted up until 2006. At that point, it came under heavy public scrutiny for the unjust invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan and the numerous war crimes committed during those invasions. Then, in 2009, it re-emerged when the coast was clear. There was a new puppet in office, and the public had seemed to forgot about its existence. Once again, the Zionists had a green light to continue their hit list. The Project for the New American Century was founded by Bill Kristol.
Welcome to Conversations. I'm Bill Kristol.
And Dr. Robert Kagan.
Dr. Robert Kagan.
17 of its members became top advisors to the president during the Bush administration. Jews were grossly overrepresented within the Project for the New American Century. The entirety of its top membership was Jewish, as well as over half of all the membership, despite the fact that Jews only make up 1.7% of the population of the United States. Although the Project for the New American Century rose to White House prominence under the Bush administration, their demands had been followed since the Clinton presidency, as well as other Zionist demands, such as the Israeli policy paper, A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm, which was written in 1996 and called for destabilization of Iraq as well as other Middle Eastern countries. The Project for the New American Century frequently wrote letters to President Clinton. He responded with the 1998 Desert Fox attack on Iraq. The history of our government writing about going to war in their documents, then staging events to get public support is nothing new. From the USS Maine, to the Lusitania, to Pearl Harbor, to the Gulf of Tonkin, all the way to the quote, New Pearl Harbor that the Project for the New American Century wrote about in their Rebuilding America's Defenses paper that they deemed necessary to get public support to fight multiple simultaneous wars, and the 7 countries they felt were a threat to the Rothschild central banking system and the Rothschild state of Israel. 1 year later, they got their new Pearl Harbor. This event became known as 9/11.
This is the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century for us. And the president will have to deal with it. He will have to deal with these people overseas that are telling us they're going to destroy us.
The Cold War era was up, and there was no longer an enemy for the public to fear. But the military-industrial complex still needed to feed their war economy. They needed a new enemy, a faceless enemy, that would ensure perpetual warfare and increase their military spending that they so desperately begged for in their Rebuilding America's Defenses paper. This new need for a faceless enemy gave birth to one of the most important tools of modern warfare, the terrorists. The invention of the terrorists gave the Zionists the green light from the public to go after the countries on their hit lists.
I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
Not only did the creation of terrorism allow for perpetual warfare, it also allowed for the achievement of Zionist agendas, such as the Greater Israel Project, and for corporate profiteers like Exxon, Halliburton, Lockheed, and more recently, Genie Energy, as well as many other pro-Zionist corporations to profit immensely from these wars. All these corporations can be traced back directly to the Project for the New American Century through its members. Due to the public outrage from the mass slaughter of the innocents during the full-fledged invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, the Zionists needed a new, subtle, and less direct approach for destabilization and regime change, to finish their hit list and for their own sadistic agendas. This gave birth to the modern Arab Spring. Again, there was a new puppet in office, who the anti-war protesters trusted. Little did they know, the same Zionist hidden hand was pulling the strings behind the curtain. In January of 2011, the Zionist hit list was resumed, starting with Egypt. Instead of invasion, CIA assets and social media propaganda was used to achieve regime change. In less than a month, the Egyptian president gave in to Zionist demands. Just as the Egyptian revolution ended in February of 2011, the Libyan revolution against Gaddafi began. Keep in mind, Gaddafi lived a very modest lifestyle, built Libya up to become an immensely prosperous nation, spoke out against the UN, and is quoted as saying, "I protect Europe from a flood of illegal African immigrants." CIA assets like Khalifa Haftar, who was provably on the CIA payroll for 20 years, were instrumental in the overthrow of Gaddafi. He organized shootings on government targets, yet there was a complete Western media blackout of these shootings, until Gaddafi had to fire back. Then there was complete media coverage and demonization of Gaddafi. It became a humanitarian issue. It became the "he's killing his own people" story. Just a short 7 months later, Gaddafi was beaten to death by the terrorist pawns of the Zionist intelligence communities. The Rothschild central banking system soon followed. Libya now remains in ruins, allowing for thousands of African invaders to flood into Europe, as well as many other corporate gains that came from Gaddafi's removal. Who's next on the list? Syria. Egypt and Libya worked well, so there's no need to change the strategy. Use CIA assets and social media propaganda to create a conflict. Except this time, Assad didn't give up so easy. He also had allies like Russia, who came to his aid and stopped the Zionist proxy armies dead in their tracks, as well as countries like Iran, who are also on that hit list and know someday their fate is destined to be the same. They attempted to play the same humanitarian crisis game that they've been playing since the initial invasion of Iraq, except this time the whole world wasn't buying it. The Zionists created and orchestrated Syrian civil war has decimated the once prosperous and flourishing nation of Syria. The country is now in ruins, yet Assad still remains. This is what happens when you don't go along with the Zionist central banking system. They paint you out as a villain, then destroy your country, slaughter the innocent, and hand it over to tyrannical warlords. There are still a few countries on the Zionist hit list. Be prepared for future humanitarian crisis. What you're hearing from your government is propaganda. There are always two sides to every story. You're only hearing one. And ask yourself, who are the ones that are really killing the innocent?